Okay, so I believe it's up. Yes, it is. So, hey everyone, I'm Rihanna, and I'll be your mentor for Ecology. Week 4 Ecology with the youth team advisors in the biological research program. So I hope you guys have been enjoying all the previous sessions. I hope it's been informative and that you liked it. And all of the mentors will have made a great impression on you, and you're very interested in the youth team advisors right now. So I apologize in advance because of my voice. It's a little bit raspy because I have a sore throat, but I'll be trying to sound as clear as possible throughout the presentation so that you guys will be able to understand. Okay, so without further delay, let us get into it. So before we start, that was a big contradiction. Without further delay, before we start. Anyways, so I have an icebreaker for you guys. So I want you to think about it, keep it in mind as we go along into the presentation. I try to keep it relatively short so that you guys will be able to understand, and it will be simple enough. So my question for you guys today is, if you had to be an animal in the animal kingdom, what animal would you be and why? Would you want to be an amphibian? Would you want to be a mammal? Maybe you don't even want to be an animal at all. Maybe you want to be a plant. Or maybe you just like being a human. That's great too. So I want you to think about that as we go into what ecology is, right? So moving on. Oh, I skipped forward. Right, yes. So we have 5 objectives to cover. So the first will be ecological principles, so energy flow, traffic levels, and ecological pyramids. Then population dynamics and limiting factors, symbiosis, niche theory and competition, environmental biology, and climate change and biogeochemistry. So I try to keep it as concise yet understandable as possible because we don't want to fluster anyone, right? We're just here to learn and have fun. So let's start with, what is ecology? So ecology is a branch of biology that studies the interactions among organisms and between organisms and their physical surroundings. So it could be the study of 2 birds and the way one bird interacts with a tree, to put it simply, or the study of, well, two humans interacting, and then you sitting down right now looking at this video, the study of how you and your physical surroundings is interacting with your phone, is interacting with anything that's non-living, abiotic or biotic, right? So it provides insight into how energy, matter, and life itself are structured and sustained across ecosystems. And it's critical not only for knowing its sake, because all of us, we love to have a little bit of brains. We want to be academic weapons, but it's not only critical for just being an academic weapon, but also for addressing pressing global challenges like climate change, biodiversity loss, sustainable resource management. It's all important. It all ties in, and it's very significant in today's world. So the first thing we're going to talk about is energy flow, trophic levels, and ecological pyramids. So all energy in ecosystems originates from the sun. Let's begin with that. So firstly, we have producers that they capture that solar energy through photosynthesis. And immediately when you hear photosynthesis, we think plants. So that means a plant is a producer, as well as algae. I had to tell you guys that in case you didn't know. So because algae is also the foundation in aquatic ecosystems. So plants and algae would be the producers. And this energy that we get from the sun, that plants get from the sun, they move through successive trophic levels, as we see over here. So we start with the producers, that's the mushroom, for example, or that leaf, that plant over there, that's a producer. Then we have our primary consumers. They're typically herbivores. So a cow, for example, primary consumer, he's gonna come and eat grass because my bro just loves grass. Secondary consumers, those are typically carnivores. So what hunts a cow, like a lion or tiger, they're gonna come and eat the cow. And then tertiary consumers. So, well, humans eat anything. We could be the tertiary consumer, you don't think? We eat anything at this point, so we could be the tertiary and highest level consumer. And then we have decomposers. Now, while all of this is well and good, we missed an important part in ecological principles. That 10% energy loss. What about that 10% energy loss? I wonder, do you have a guess? In actuality, yes, this seems like, oh, well, they're going to start with energy, so they're going to get energy as it flows along. Yes, correct. But not all energy is transferred. In fact, only 10% of energy is actually transferred from one organism to the other. So a producer could have 10,000 joules of energy. Primary consumer will only get 10% of that, so they'll only get 1,000. Secondary only gets 100. Tertiary, they'll only get 10. Right? So only 10% of that energy at one level is transferred to the next, and the remainder is lost as heat or used up in metabolic reactions, respiration, excretion, etc. And that explains why ecological pyramids are so broad at the base and narrow at the top. So I'm going to show you what I mean now. So this is a nice example of an ecological pyramid. So we have producers at the bottom, and remember we established that the base is the largest, the top is the smallest. That's because the base is where the producers are, and the producers will be most abundant in mass and in energy. So they would have a wide base but a smaller top, because as we go up at the trophic levels, the numbers will start to decrease, because there's not a cow for every single strand of grass there is on land. All right, a cow needs more than one strand of grass to survive, hence the reason it will go down. Because even though the producers are big, the carnivores, or the herbivores, the herbivores need an adequate amount of grass to survive. The secondary consumers, so the carnivores, they need an adequate amount of the herbivores to survive. So, and it will continue going like that, being less and less and less in number, because there's only so much energy to go around, and so much numbers of organisms existing as well too in an ecological pyramid. Right, so now we're going to move on to population dynamics and limiting factors. Now this, I love talking about this, but I'm keeping it short so it wouldn't be too confusing, right? So simply put, population dynamics refers to the study of how and why populations change in size over time. So even we see this in human population as well too: birth rate, death rate, immigration, diseases, diseases like COVID-19, the plague. All these different things influence how and why populations grow, shrink, or remain stable, right? And there are two categories of limiting factors that regulate population growth. So that's density dependent and density independent. So density dependent factors would be predation, competition, and disease. So those specific factors, those effects intensify as a population size increases. So for example, if there's a huge amount of cows, don't you think that there's gonna be a relatively large amount of lions hunting that huge amount of cows, because they need food? Competition as well too. Two lions are fighting over a gazelle. That's gonna That's going to affect the density of a specific population, because the lions are going to fight each other as well too for the gazelle. So the lion population might go down in attempt to get food. And density independent factors are things that we can't control. So natural disasters, climate events. So let's, God forbid, a hurricane passes through right now. All the cows die, all the horses die, all the birds can't fly anymore, all the ants die, every animal dies. Then what we're gonna do? We have no animal kingdom. Or let's just say all the cows die, we have no herbivore. Let's say all the carnivores die, we have no more carnivores. So all of these things will influence density of a population. And now we're going to move on to one small concept that I would want you guys to be aware of. That's carrying capacity, which is essentially just the maximum number of individuals an environment can support sustainably. So this graph is an example of a logistic graph. So this is generally when a population is very stable. It stabilizes as carrying capacity is reached. So hence the reason we see that red dotted line going across there. And there's two patterns oftentimes with these graphs of population growth. So there's exponential growth, which is rapid and unsustainable. So it will look nothing like this graph. And the logistic growth that I'm showing you now, which stabilizes as carrying capacity is reached. So now we're moving on to symbiosis, niche theory, and competition. So species interactions, they form the foundation of ecological communities. We know this. We know this in interacting with humans every single day. Symbiosis refers to the long-term biological associations between species. So it's basically different types of interactions between species, and it could be three different interactions: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. So mutualism is where both organisms benefit. So for example, the bees and flowers, when they interact, the flowers get pollinated, bees get fed from the nectar. For commensalism, one benefits, one is unaffected. And I know there's a huge debate surrounding this topic with regards to a certain example. So I want you guys to think about it and see if you have like a very good evidence to back up why it can be two and just one specific relationship. So the cow and the egret, right? Many people debate between mutualism and commensalism for this, because they think that, well, it'll be commensalism because the egret will just pick up the ticks and the cow will just be indifferent. But some say mutualism because the cow has no more ticks, so it wouldn't, will be at a disadvantage, and the egret gets food. So I want to know which one you guys think, because it is a very interesting debate, because I know some people are very adamant about it not being the two. Me personally, I think it could be both, and the safest thing to go is with mutualism, in my personal opinion. And then the last one is parasitism, where one benefits and the host is harmed. So I don't know if you guys ever watched that Marvel movie Venom. Venom was a parasite. Venom was killing Eddie inside, and he didn't want Eddie to know. So naturally, because Eddie would have naturally, wanted him to get out of his body, and Venom doesn't want that because he will be in lack of a host, and he will die outside of the host. And we also have that in humans as well with tapeworms, because whether we like it or not, we do get tapeworm infections in humans as well too. It's very scary, to be quite frank. But those are the three symbiotic relationships that are typically looked at in ecology. Now we're moving on to a niche. So a niche is basically an organism's role in an ecosystem. So habitat, diet, and its interactions, all of this influences its niche, right? And there's a principle called the principle of competitive exclusion, which states that no two species can occupy the exact same niche indefinitely. Now, you know that's a problem. Immediately, when we think of that, competition. Obviously, if you and someone else is applying for a job, right? You're going to a job interview. You want to show that you are the one person that could really do this. You don't want the other person to get it. You want to get a job. You want to land that job. So you're not going to want the other person to show their strengths and be better than you. You want to be the best to get that job. And there are two types of competition: intraspecific, which is where it's within the same species. So, for example, competing for a mate, like a deer might compete with his brother for the same girl there. And interspecific is between different species. So, for example, the lions and the hyenas when they compete for food. Now we're going to go into nutrient cycles. So, environmental biology and nutrient cycles in particular. So we're just going to be looking at three: the carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle, and the phosphorus cycle. But don't worry, I summarized it because I know a lot of people hate the nutrient cycle, so I try to keep it very short, right? So very nice looking diagram of the carbon cycle, the simplest one I think for us to understand. So just the premise of it. So carbon circulates through different processes, namely photosynthesis, respiration, decomposition, and combustion, which we see in the diagram. But then we have those anthropogenic activities. So in other words, those burning of fossil fuels and deforestation that gives rise to more carbon in the atmosphere. This would disrupt that ecological balance that we had with those nice processes, with photosynthesis, respiration, decomposition, and combustion. And this will contribute to global climate change in turn. Now we're moving on to the nitrogen cycle. So nitrogen gas, although it's abundant in the atmosphere, it's unable to most organisms. So there's nitrogen fixing bacteria that converts it into usual forms like ammonia and nitrates. And plants assimilate these compounds and they move through food webs before returning it to the soil through decomposition and denitrification. And we could see all of that in this diagram because I didn't want to make it too complicated for you guys to understand. I just wanted it to be like a brief thing where you can understand at least the premise of it, right? And the last cycle is the phosphorus cycle. Please pardon my typo in phosphorus. I did not even catch that until now, so please pardon that. So unlike the carbon and nitrogen cycle, phosphorus has no gaseous phase. So it cycles more slowly, primarily through like the weathering of rocks, soil absorption, plant uptake, and they return via decomposition, right? And well, in general, phosphorus is like essential for DNA, ATP, bone formation, and all these different things as well too. And there are graphs as well of nutrient concentrations in ecosystems. Just a note, I didn't include it in this presentation, but there are graphs of nutrient concentrations in ecosystems, particularly for carbon dioxide because of climate change. And those demonstrate like significant increase in greenhouse gases since like the Industrial Revolution. So with the intent of highlighting how humans have influence on these cycles. So you all should do some research and look at those graphs and you tell me if you see anything interesting in it, anything noteworthy, a huge jump maybe, because well, we are in a more advanced era now, so if there will be a lot of changes and stuff in this time as compared to back then. Right, so I just wanted to touch on these two things briefly. So there are two concepts that we should know about: is bioaccumulation, which is where toxins build up in an organism's tissue over time, and biomagnification, where there's an increase in toxin concentration as it moves up in the food chain. So an example of bioaccumulation would be like if we didn't have a liver, for example, all those toxins and stuff is just gonna build up in our body and we'll just be permanently sick. We wouldn't even be alive at this point because our body will just be in a constant state of sickness and infection. We'll get sick so easily and we'll just have to be in and out of hospitals, and that's just very sad. It's crazy. And but in biomagnification, since it's the increase in toxin concentration as it moves up a food chain, that's for example like fish, certain types of fish, mercury in fish and sharks. So I know a lot of people don't want to eat fish and sharks because they don't want to be exposed to those things, because it is something that is being made more, that people are being more educated about. They know about it more typically now. And obviously, well, we would have to touch on this too, because unfortunately everything has human impact, whether it be for the good or bad, right? So human activities have profoundly altered natural systems. So habitat loss, primarily through deforestation and urbanization, and that still remains the greatest threat to biodiversity. And pollution as well, to the air, water, noise, soil pollution, they have all disrupted ecological balance, while processes like bioaccumulation and biomagnification increase the toxicity of pollutions as they move up the food chain. So for example, mercury in aquatic ecosystems, it could accumulate in the fish and then impact on human health after we eat it. And we don't want to eat fish and then we just puff up on all these different things. Unless you're allergic, well then I guess that can be helped. But we don't want to be sick after eating fish, after having too much mercury in us from eating fish, right? And now our last point of today. I know I spoke a little bit fast, but I didn't want it to be too long because I don't want to take up too much of your time. It's just really a short session. So our last topic today would be climate and biogeochemistry. So climate change introduces additional ecological stress. So with the rising global temperatures, there's a shift in species ranges. So species migration, they alter their migration patterns, and in turn their habitats are lost. The birds migrate way earlier now. The polar bears, they lose their habitats as well because of the melting ice caps. And then there's ocean acidification too, which is caused by excess atmospheric